when we step back, or maybe when it's stared right in its face, the current food environment is truly not neutral. As you said, it's judgy. It's fast, it's convenient, it's engineered, and it's constantly in front of us. If you think about it, there's a lot there. Welcome back to Illuminating Being. It's a space where we explore how nourishment, environment, and really everyday patterns shape the health and well-being of both children and families. And so I'm Dr. Elizabeth Cook, and here with me is Dr. Keith Summers. And in these conversations, especially I think particularly today, we're not always just talking about food in terms of what it particularly is or the nutrients or what are the guidelines around it. We really want to step back specifically in this episode around the bigger picture, how our behaviors are shaped and how our environments influence us. And so I would think that our patterns that we live are not by accident. There's a lot happening. So in the conversation, we're really talking about the business of food, just not what people are eating, but what is influencing some of those first choices and then all of our choices. So welcome.
Good
Dr.
morning, Dr.
Summers.
Cook. It's always great to be here. And these conversations are right. They're not just endpoints. They're hopefully starters for people to sort of like expand their thinking, maybe expand some knowledge, but also, one of our undercurrents and themes and threads is sort of removing the judgment piece of this whole conversation around food, because it can get very judgy out there in the world.
And so when we step back, or maybe when it's stared right in its face, the current food environment is truly not neutral. As you said, it's judgy. It's fast, it's convenient, it's engineered, and it's constantly in front of us. And I actually just started watching the history series with Finley and a couple of us where it's the history of food in the US. So if you think about it, there's a lot there. Anyway, over time,
Right.
when you look at the food environment today, so what do you see as the biggest forces shaping how people eat from your experience?
I think that there's two things. There's traditions and family. And I think that's sort of the grounding part, that what you grew up with is sort of what really shapes in a unconscious, subconscious way. You don't have to think about it. So it's just sort of known to you. So the work is I do or don't want to continue that tradition or that eating pattern. Growing up, we are a fast food nation, right? And we're a convenience nation. So I think the food industry has created this sort of convenience of eating, right? And so convenience of eating frequently means processing, right? So I think not all processed foods are created equally. The article we were just talking to you about earlier is that, the food industry is obviously balancing. I don't think that they're evil empires necessarily, but they've got profit versus health, right? So how do they create this food for the masses? And also they want it to be profitable, because you can't stay in business because it's a business. Yeah. So I think that's the shaping property, is sort of like you're established by your experience and growing up. And so I think that has a huge influence.
Well, watching that series, the history, the food that built America, and it's on the History Channel.
Yeah.
But it really is the essence of the beginnings of large businesses.
Right.
And it started with the Kellogg, Dr. Kellogg, and his healthful sanitarium.
Right.
And then also, like, similar at the same times was Heinz, which were for Pittsburgh. So we know that history. Right. And one fact I learned is he was the first manufacturing company that electrified his full factory. So, I'm an electrical,
Thanks to George Westinghouse, probably.
Yes. But it was a lot of innovation and a lot of change. Right. And then also he created the first assembly line. But when you think about the history, a lot of that was just, they weren't like an evil empire or anything of that sort. They were just creating product that could be distributed across the railroads.
Right.
Okay.
And just
I diverged.
But I think those divergences, that's part of the beauty of our conversations. And I think understanding, things that are perishable. So if we think about, we're just used to what we have today. We didn't have refrigeration 100 years ago.
I learned about bird's eye.
Right.
That was the first frozen food company,
For sure. Yes. I
and
mean,
when it was
incredible what
invented,
they
it
did.
couldn't nobody had refrigerators, let alone freezers. No
Users.
one had technology to, like, fast freeze, which is what we need
Right.
to have the food that we have. Yeah, so
Right.
and this is only, like, a
Right.
hun less yeah, 100 years ago.
So so I happened to have a patient in the other day and, who ended up being sick, but they're on their way to DC, um, to go see, um, the cherry blossoms. Ding, ding, ding. We're always reading, I think. So I'm like, okay, well, and she was like, yeah, the Japanese, and they are a Japanese family. I was like, yeah, they had donated the cherry blossoms, and that's why we have Washington D.C. And I said, well, there's a really interesting book by this guy David Fairchild, who wrote Food Glory, and he worked for the Department of Agriculture, and he is basically why we have our food system. He traveled the world, brought back seeds and clippings, then created all the flowering plants and things in the agricultural that we have today,
Wow,
and happened to be married to the daughter of Alexander Graham Bell.
look at that.
Look at that little history. One of those trivia answers that people are,
Little
playing Trivial
trivia
Pursuit or
win.
something.
I actually just did a trivia night last week. Didn't think I was gonna like it, and it was really enjoyable.
Yeah.
Okay, so the idea is that the environment, our environment, the environment is shaping our behaviors. And so when we think about, it's when something is available, constantly marketed and
Right.
designed to be easy. And that was a lot of what the marketing
Right.
was when they were innovating all of these, quick solutions. It starts to truly just influence our ability on a very deep level. So I don't know, just because we like to open the door for some interesting sound bits, what about food is actually designed? Like from what like it's not just to taste good, but it's
Right. I
really
mean, it's obviously a visual. It's the shape of the food, right? The convenience. I mean, obviously we got packaging, so, um, and there's all jingles, right? So I think, it's like, where's the beef? Things like that, that just sort of, you just easily can capture in that moment. And Lay's potato chips, you just can't eat one, right? So it also plays on our human sort of basic food desires. Salt, sugar tend to be the primary drivers of certainly the sales for food in the food industry. And if you introduce those sort of foods to babies, they're going to typically love them, right?
right.
That's sort of an attraction. One of the things that's important in trying to introduce foods to children is to go for the bitter. And how we introduce foods to kids, that takes work, and nothing's a home run on the first go round, in that way. But the food industry has found a way to supplant that by really hitting the trigger points for you know, our brain sort of response to like pleasure, right? It's going for the pleasure center, basically.
Right. So it's like designed to keep us coming back visually, texture, smells. And then also this whole, and I think you brought up a book, but about, I think it's called Eat, Gobble, and Go. But that really is in essence what we have, this culture we've created is these quick ways to eat and then we're on the go. And so that's a pattern, right? That then becomes a part of all of our daily lives to eat quickly, eat sadly distracted, and really, eat without really noticing. And then to do it right, which means to slow down, to prepare, like takes time. And then not only you have to do that once, you have to do that like a couple of times a day. So it's like, how do you fit this into our schedules that we, find ourselves in?
And I think the business of food has sort of, a reflection on our sort of type A society and business world. I mean, if you go around the world, the food, the family meal, the meal takes precedent. In France and other places, kids get an hour for lunch at school. I mean, we're lucky. The average lunchtime is 18 minutes, maybe in America. I mean, they don't have time to even go through the line, sit down, let alone even taste the food that they're eating half the time.
Right.
So those sort of things. And the consequences, I think we see. I mean, we're looking across the world. I mean, it's not just America, but the consequences of the food industry and the food patterns that we're in have led to what we're dealing with as far as the chronic diseases and diseases of affluence, we call them, but you don't even have to be affluent. I think you just have to be eating the industrialized food.
Right. And so when you combine the fact that food is being marketed and designed for us to eat distracted and to be consumed easily, then it becomes very hard for the body to regulate naturally. How does that shift toward this distracted faster eating ability to recognize hunger or the fullness? I mean, is that
Right.
connected? Is that real?
100%. I think that that's, we just like any habit, we then have less thoughtfulness in our meals and you know, families are on the go, right? They now, I mean, we did one sport maybe a season. We had seasons where we didn't play a sport. Families that they're year round playing sports. They're doing 4 or 5 nights out a week. So, the reality is, and both parents are working, who's going to make the dinner? Maybe if you have a grandparent that's living with them who does the food prep, but you catch it,
Right,
Chick-fil-A, it's
even if you have someone that's at home cooking or whatever that structure that we all think we talk about, it doesn't mean we're making time for it anyway. So that's like we're like double whammy. Okay, anyway, sorry. That was a rant.
No, but I
As
think,
you're
I
running
think it
and
does
moving.
reflect and so the question that I think we're trying to sort of pinpoint and also reflect on is that's our reality. How do we navigate this space
Right.
without, you know and as I tell parents, it's not that you never eat a Whopper or you never eat a Chick-fil-A. I mean, the never is not possible, but it doesn't mean you won't still be able to be healthy.
I think, yeah, I'm a big person, reflective, and being intentional is, my two bookends of my day. Reflect awareness. So it's really what has happened is a loss of awareness feels like a big piece of this. So when eating
Totally.
becomes automatic, people are no longer responding to the body, they're responding to an environment, which you're saying and implying, and I guess is my next question, we have control of recreating. No matter where we are in life, we can like take a moment, take a breath, and do certain actions. So, in regards to children, or specifically when it comes to this environment, what are some of these hows? Just to
Well,
reflect on that, have what you've seen work or not work with your
and I think that
community.
really will depend a lot on the family dynamic and how it's being driven, right? So I think my ultimate role is as advisor, guide, in that sense. Because, in a short visit to sort of surmise everything that's going on in a home and in the whole thinking. But interestingly enough, you can't accomplish a lot. So I think it's like throwing out a few gems of things like things we've talked about, eating the rainbow, making meal and family time the meal time, right? That it's conversation. So just sitting at the dining room table, kitchen table, doesn't mean you have to eat. You have to be present, right? I mean, we talk about this all the time. So we want the kids not to be distracted on their technology. I mean, that's the other piece that we didn't grow up with. There was a phone, it was attached to the wall. It was not in our pockets. It wasn't sitting on the table. There might have been a television, but so trying to minimize distractions so that making eye contact, helping to sort of foster conversations, what'd you do at school today? Nothing. I don't know. Right. Well, you know, what are conversation starters? What are ways to engage your kids in something about describing things? Language is powerful, and so I think, it's empowering the kids, empowering the parents to sort of, like, take hold, and, I think as parents, our kids are independent beings. I think if we're trying to control them, we're not gonna get very far with being, helping them to sort of be the best them and figure out who they are. We wanna, they start out as little infants. We keep them safe, then they become, young teenagers and then young adults. And so hopefully over that course of time, we've helped give them some guidance. You have to stumble a little bit. You have to fall down, right? You have to scrape your knee. But what do you learn from that, right? So I think, in the business world, it's like, I don't like to use failure, but it's not necessarily failure, but it's like all you do is win and get a medal, which is one other thing that we talk about in
Yeah.
pediatrics. Like everybody participates in a sport and they all get a medal like they won. So, we don't want anybody to lose. Well, it doesn't have to be winning and losing. don't like that sort of narrative. And success is not about the winning and losing. It's about the process, about what do you learn during the process. So whether it's in business, whether it's in preparing a meal, sometimes the recipe turns out fantastic. You're like, I want to do that again. And you do it the same way next time. And you're like, it just doesn't have the same, didn't hit that point. And it's like, well, what did I do differently? Did I add more of this? And who knows? It doesn't have to be that everything is critiqued. We're in this world where we critique everything to the nth degree instead of just like you said, being present and just enjoy it.
Yeah. I mean, so I think to keep it simple, once you are aware, it's like kind of sometimes I always think like, oh, I wish I didn't know this. But once you're aware, you can take action on that. So knowing that the environments we create based on the systems that we're living in, you know, communicate and use language to our children like that this is what we're doing and why we're doing it, and not to be restrictive and create, this culture of like anxiety around food, but
Right.
really just like an awareness of the importance of preparing the food, slowing down, being present with each other, and realize that, that is against the system that we're in, which is this go, eat, rinse and repeat, no pauses.
And I think that the other piece of America that, we're in this individualization, this customization. So everything is also being made for the individual, right? We sort of have lost sight
Right,
of the
the
fact that
community.
the community, and that's what family meals like, being together, making 5 meals at dinner because each child doesn't eat this or that sends a message that, well, that's okay.
Right.
And it is okay for them not to like certain foods, but at the same time, how do you promote
The
the
communal, like,
right,
we are together, we're doing this together, like, we're all not gonna like everything, but yeah. And it's not really, so what do we do it's not really about the extremes. It's not about perfection, and it's not
right,
about eliminating everything overnight because
right,
you can't build anything in a day. And it's not about fear. So really just awareness and steady shifts. So like start with the observations, not really the judgment. Like what are
right,
we actually eating? And
right,
when are we gonna eat it? And when are we gonna eat
right.
it together? And then like start with one night. And then start with, I'm just like riffing here. This is more for me.
Yeah,
And then
it's
reintroduce real food simply. Like don't overcomplicate it.
right. Well,
One meal a day. Whole
you
grain.
represent the households, right? I
Right.
mean, not that I don't cook at home, but my wife was the mothers are the largest driver and driving force for organizing, preparing meals. I mean, not that there aren't fathers and dads that do contribute or maybe do that at home, but I would say the vast majority of homes are going to
Right.
be driven by the mom. I mean,
And
that's
that ultimately, if you think about it, comes from the original, like, you are the source of the food and very quickly. So, like, that's a habit that's
right.
created and it's an awareness that's threaded.
And I think it's like teachable moments, right? So I think I always tell everybody the child you bear and raise is watching your every move. So
Right.
even if you think they are not paying attention, they have eyes on you. So everything you do matters. And it's not that it's good or bad, not to judge it, but that it will be an influence on who they become.
And so, kind of thinking, bringing it all together.
Yeah. The only last thing I want to say
Yeah.
is that in the customization is that somehow the food industry has taken us also on this crazy path of supersize, right? That's a whole nother category, which we can talk about, but
But there's a
you
reason
know,
why.
right. And it goes to not only supersize when you go to the fast food place, but to the supersize where you go to Costco and Sam's Club and you buy more than you need, right? So instead of buying just a couple apples, you buy the bushel of apples every time, or you buy the, you know, 10 reams of paper, or you buy, 100, you know, uh, baggies, containers, because you're thinking you're getting a deal, right? We're in this world that the business community has done a good job of what's the best deal. And food is also part of that equation.
I like it. And it's not just about food, it's about reclaiming the awareness of the world that has been designed to move us quickly, quietly, and kind of unconsciously. So I think once, so we're not broken, we were shaped. And so once we see that, it's just
Right.
something powerful and we can start,
Right.
making small changes. I
totally.
love it. Any other last
Okay.
words or a quote from a book?
All right, so we've got the Michael Pollan Food Rules and Eater's Manual. So the first one going up against the food industry here: avoid food products containing ingredients that a third grader cannot pronounce. Basically, the same idea, different mnemonic. Keep it simple, right? So,
Wonder where I got that from.
but I think we do try to distill this down to something that's actionable for families. So keep it simple, right?
Right.
You don't have to. There are great recipe books, and you can go online, but sometimes the most simple things can be the most rewarding.
Love it. Okay, well,
Right?
thank you for showing up for another conversation. And
Great to be
for our
here.
listeners, if you're enjoying these conversations, share this episode with someone in your life, a friend, a partner, another parent,
Yes.
someone who's really thinking about how we live, how we eat, and how we show up, because these conversations, I think, truly matter. And you never know where you're going to get that spark of a light bulb of an awareness.
The
So,
aha moment. So
so
there
yeah.
we are.
So this is Illuminating Being, where we explore how to be more aware, more intentional, and more
Okay.
connected. So thank you for being here.
Okay. Great to be here.